Now, at the moment, parents can only claim benefits like universal credit and child tax credit for their first 2 children. It's called the 2-child benefit cap and was introduced by the Conservative government in 2017. But the policy has been widely criticised, with studies suggesting that scrapping the cap would immediately lift 500,000 children out of poverty. But to scrap it would then cost more than £4 billion. So the government are trying to think of ways around that. Now, one option being considered is to make parents of children under the age of 5 exempt, meaning that you could receive benefits for up to 3 or 4 children at a time. Mike, how do you feel about that?
Well, I don't think you should expand child benefit in any way at all. I mean, it's so complicated when you talk about universal credit and all sorts of things, child benefit, age up to 5. I can make it very simple. Do not expand the amount of child credit we give at the moment. 2 children is fine. If you want to have more children after that, that's up to you. But don't expect the state to supplement your responsibility as a parent. In fact, I'm very surprised that the Labour government, when they came in, didn't expand it. But now they'll be under even more pressure to scrap it altogether because we have to save money.
But we have a quarter of children living in poverty in this country.
I don't want any children to live in poverty.
So what do we do about that then?
Well, what I was going to say is poverty in this country is relative. How do you define poverty? We've got one of the biggest welfare states in the world. £270 billion a year makes up the welfare state budget, OK? So poverty is relative compared to what you've got inside somebody's house. What I would say is basically, if you decide to have children and bring children up, you should work out how you're going to fund that without having to rely on the state.
I can tell you exactly what poverty is or how it's calculated in this country anyway. It is households with less than 60% of the median income after household costs have been accounted for. So that's the number that we're talking here. Maybe
Very
poverty,
vague,
well, that's quite specific. Maybe poverty is relative, and actually when we're thinking about poverty in other countries, it's not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same if you're comparing it to other countries, but the point is there are kids in this country who are living in poverty, and they are basically, needing more nourishment. They need more nutrition. There are kids who are, I think what Mike's talking about is, look, the rich kids got the PlayStation, you haven't got the PlayStation. The point is there's still a layer of millions of children in this country who aren't getting fed, who aren't getting the nutrition, and especially when it comes to the under 5s, that's the most important time of a human's life. That's when all the cognitive development happens. That all happens via good nutrition, bad nutrition, bad, poverty outcomes, then lead to, not for all kids, but can lead to criminality later on in life and bad outcomes. And also, I just think on a bigger level, if we're serious as a society about who we are, as Brits, as British people, as the English and the Scots, I think we need to take child poverty seriously. I don't want to end up like India or like the United States as well, a first world country that has ridiculous poverty.
But we've got, Storm, we've got 5 million people in this country who are economically inactive. Some of them will be parents, but there are big vacancies in the job market. I just think if you make it too comfortable for parents to bring up a family with the aid of the state, they lose the initiative to go and do it themselves.
I would go as far as to say many of those will be inactive, will be parents, because parenting is not something that we value in this country particularly well, and single parents can't work if they've got young children under 5 at home. So would you, if you're going to take the approach that if you're going to have children, you have to take responsibility for them, we just scrap child benefits completely?
Well, it's got to be an option now for the Labour government. I mean, they've done the unthinkable already. They've got rid of overseas aid. They've scrapped 50% of it. That was unthinkable when this government came to power. But in the modern world, where we've now got to start fending for ourselves in terms of defending ourselves, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, is going to have to look at every option. Every option.
I agree with Mike that things are changing rapidly, actually day by day at the moment, in terms of President Trump, what's happening with Russia. But what I don't understand is a lot of the people who usually give child poverty a kicking, because they're usually looking at parents and think, there's a level of parents in this country who are just basically sucking off the teat of the state. I think if you're going to give money to people in your society, you literally give it to the oldest and the youngest, the people who can't, fend for themselves. Pensioners as well as, the kids. And I don't understand why so many people who want pensioners to get more will then want to take it away from the kids. Let's look at the middle if we're going to take any cuts.
But hold on, Mike may have a point here. One of the arguments for taking away the cap, the two-child cap, is to try and increase the birth rate in this country. We know it's decreasing, so in order to make it increase,
massively decreasing.
Will that help our economy, and will that help our dependence on the benefit state in this country if we are encouraging people to have children by offering them up cash?
Well,
will it not just keep that cycle going of us feeling dependent on the state?
No. First of all, yes, our birth rates are going, so we need more. We need more kids.
We need more babies.
Yeah, we need more. Or
I'm helping.
We can replace it with immigration, which most people, especially at the moment, don't want. So then we need to have more children. Secondly, I think what the Labour Party are probably doing with this is just right, because they're looking at it up to the age of 5. Those really important years. I've had kids. I know that child benefit really helped me and my wife out when the kids were first born. I look around all my friends, I look around people I meet in my day-to-day job. It's hard bringing up kids. I remember the feeling when they first went off to school where I felt my wallet just feeling a bit more flush. Not from child benefit, but because I wasn't buying nappies every day. I wasn't looking at formula.
But hadn't you prepared for that as a parent? Didn't you decide when you were a parent? Didn't you say to your partner in life or your wife, now, can we afford to have children? Yes, we can. What a joy it's going to be to battle through life and do it ourselves.
No, I didn't. And most people don't.
You must have that thought. You can't just say, I think we'll have children without considering the consequences.
Did you do that at school? Did you have a chat, a meeting with your husband?
We actually did have a bit of a financial chat. I'm sorry to disprove, but I think many parents do have a sort of financial chat about, how many children can you afford and that sort of thing, and when you want to stop. The problem is, Mike, with that, is that circumstances change, people die, people lose their jobs, people get made redundant. And in those sorts of situations, shouldn't we as a state want to look after those individuals? Definitely. On top of that, you can't... I've forgotten what I was going to say there.
Yeah. My definition of the welfare state is that everybody should contribute. So people like me who earns good money must contribute to a welfare state. But the welfare state has got to be a safety net, not a provision, to compensate people for not working.
You've just reminded me on what I was going to say there. On top of that, a lot of people on universal credit are working. They are working people on universal credit. So these are working families who are getting these benefits, who need them to be able to put food on the table. Yeah. So these aren't lazy layabouts that some people like to think about that are, bleeding the state dry. These are individuals, probably both parents, out working and just not earning enough to be able to put enough food on the table. Yeah. Shouldn't we be helping them out?
Well, we should be helping them out if they help themselves out. I think it's a two-way deal, this. The problem is, over the years, and I'm not just talking about the current government, 14 years of Tory government as well, just kept bloating the state, make it bigger, bigger and bigger. Got to make it smaller.
OK, let's go to... Sorry, Bobby, I just want to go to the calls. Do give us a call. 0207 862 2222 is the number for all our debates today. Get your views on this one. Liz from Essex, what's your thoughts?
I certainly don't believe we should be throwing more money at the problem. I think 2 children is more than sufficient. I think the problem comes from the people not managing their money properly. I think we need to, as a society, identify exactly within a family where it's going wrong, why that child is in poverty, and give the parents the tools to, if they need cooking skills, to be able to go out and buy some vegetables and cook nutritious meals, that would be a resource.
But Liz, find out that 40%, so what we're talking about here, child benefit, is sort of child tax credit, universal credit benefits, not child benefit that's given to the majority of the population. So this is specifically for the most vulnerable in society. And we are talking about 40%, I understand, but 40% of people on universal credit are working, Liz, so they are trying to help themselves. They're just not being paid. Does that not show a bigger issue in society?
Myself, I've had tax credits. I work full-time. I understand the problem. I've lived, I've managed my money. I have very little money. And there was a period of time that I had very little money. I absolutely had to calculate my money to a penny to make sure that my child had good, nutritious food and was, had all of the resources that it needed to be clothed well. I understand that. But I do not believe that throwing money at the problem is the solution. It's giving people the tools to make their lives better themselves, identifying the problem. Children are not going to be, someone is not going to be a child forever. There is going to be a light at the end of the tunnel where that person is going to be able, that parent is going to be able to, not going to be having to pay out quite so much. The child will be in school full time, and they can get themselves a full-time job, for example. It is only a period of time, and if that person is not taught the skills, there is a reason why these people are in poverty. We need to identify the reason.
Okay, get to the root of the problem. Liz, thank you for your call. Karen from Dorset, what's your thoughts on the two-child benefit cap? Should it be lifted completely, or do you quite like the idea of any child under the age of 5 gets the universal credit or the child benefit?
Well, I have 3 children living at home, and including a set of twins. When I had my children, I had been in a very long-term relationship, but unfortunately it fell apart after we had the children. He went off with a Thai girl, abandoned us, and he's died recently as well. So there's no money coming from him, no support coming from him at all. I'm financing the children on my own. One of my children is registered disabled. I'm registered as a full-time carer. It's really tough. And children become more expensive as they get older. They eat so much more.
Especially for the boys, apparently. Karen, I appreciate that your circumstances have changed. Can I just ask, when you and your husband or you and your partner decided to have the 3rd child, was it the twins that were born second?
Yeah.
Yeah, the twins were born second.
Well, I think that's slightly different. I actually think you could get child benefit if it's multiples that are born in the second child.
Right.
So you're slightly a case apart. But let's say that the twins were born first. Did you and your husband have any discussion about how many children that you were having and how many children you could afford before having them?
Yes, we chose to have. We chose to have our first child, and we didn't want him to be an only child, so we chose to have another child. So yeah, we had to, talk it through, and we could afford them.
Yeah, exactly, at the time. So Mike, there you go. You've got a prime situation there where they had the discussion, they could afford them at the time. Circumstances have changed. What do you say to Karen?
I say, Karen, the safety net in this country of the welfare state is designed to help people like yourself whose circumstances change through no fault of your own. I'm talking about feckless parents.
Yeah, but Karen's... hold on. But Karen's saying that it's not helping her. She's really struggling.
Well, there's degrees to which you struggle, as we've talked about already, relative poverty and all that kind of stuff. What I'm saying is I would examine the situation that Karen's in, and possibly there's a case there to give Karen more. But to give her more, you have to take it away from the feckless people who don't deserve it. I think we've got to really have a look at, reassembling the welfare state.
I think this focus on the feckless is probably a bit skewed because they're not the majority of parents. They're not even a minority. They're tiny.
Karen, thank you very much for sharing your story with us. Florence from West Yorkshire, what's your thoughts on the 2-child cap? Is it fair?
Yes, it is fair. I wanted 4 children, but I had 2 because that's what I could afford. I'm a war baby. I was born in 1942. My mother was 21 and my father was killed in the war. And what we got at the time was free milk, at school, and free school dinners because my father was in the army when he got killed. But this business of they're in poverty is a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. The main thing about it is manage. It's not how much you get and how much you earn. It's what you do with it. And children, you go out and everybody's taking the kids out, fine. I want children to have everything. I love them. But they don't, they don't have water with the meal. They have fizzy drinks. They buy rubbish for them constantly.
I know, Florence, listen, I see the same situations that you see. but I don't know if they're on universal credit. I don't know if they're tax credit. We're making lots of big assumptions about the individuals that are, maybe through just our own personal experiences. I think there's a cost of living crisis, so the cutting your cloth accordingly can become quite difficult. And it sounded like your mother must have had a terrible time, but just because people have had a terrible time in the past, does that not give us sort of impetus to make things better in the future for others?
Let me correct you there, Storm. No, she didn't have a terrible time. My mother took us to the library every week, and I had took us to the pictures. I didn't do without anything. I lived with my grandparents because she couldn't get. I'm not saying that to happen to children.
I'm saying it must have been a struggle for your mother. As a single parent, that's always going to be a struggle. I'm not saying you all had a terrible time, but it must have been a struggle. Limited income, single parent, multiple children. That's not going to be easy for every parent, but it sounds like your mum did a darn good job of making the best of it. And trips to the library are never a bad idea, are they? Florence, thank you very much for your call. Thanks for all your calls on that.